Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Zayin of Masechta Yoma, Daf 17. Today's Daf, we finish off of our discussion between the machlokes, or apparently seemingly machlokes, if you're Rav Adabrid or Rav Yitzchak, between the Mishnah in Masechta Tamid, which says that the Lishkas HaTaloyim was in the northwestern corner of the Beis HaMoked, whereas the Mishnah Midos says it was in the southwestern corner of the Beis HaMoked. We then move on to the next part of our Mishnah, or really the final part of our Mishnah from Yudal Amud Aleph, which says that the Kohen Gadol could take whatever part of the Korbanis that he wants, and we discussed that a little bit. We'll see a machlokus between Abaye and Rava in terms of how exactly he was able to divide up his portions. So, let us begin on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, second line of the page. Rav Adabrei de Rav Yitzchak Amar Hailishka Aktsuye Mekatzia Uda Asu Mitzofen Mischazele Bedarim Uda Asu Midarim Mischazele Betzofen. Ooh-wah. So it says Rav Adabrei de Rav Yitzchak that there's actually there's no problem. There's no machlokas over here. There's no machlokas l'maisa. Both in the Mishnah in Masechta Midos and in the Mishnah Masechta Tamid, everyone agrees that the Lishkas Beis HaTloim was in the southwestern part of the Beis HaMoked. Basically, it would go from the southwestern. It would basically span like most of the western side of the Beis HaMoked, according to Rav Adabrei Rav Yitzchak, right? So, for example, you had in the northwestern corner, you had one office. You had another office in the northeastern corner and another office in the southeastern corner. And then you have this Lishkas Beis HaTloim, which wasn't quite in the southwestern corner. It was more on the western side, towards the southwestern corner, but it kind of ran the most of the span of the western side, right? Now, So it was mostly in the southwestern side, but it really ran, the span of most of the western side until, it got close to sort of the north, meaning it's the western, it spanned kind of the western side from close to the southwestern corner. It then kind of went across the western wall until it got close to the northwestern corner where there was another office. And the reason why in Masechta Tamid it says that the Lishkas Beis HaTloim was in the northwestern corner was because if you're coming from the south, it looked like it was in the east because it kind of spanned most of the way of the western. If you're coming from the south, it looked like it was in the north, right? Meaning, again, we're on the western side of the Beis HaMoked. Now, if you're coming from the south, west, so it looks kind of like it's in the northwest. If you're coming from the northwest, it looks like it's in the southwest. But the fact of the matter is, according to everybody, it was really in the southwest. Alright? God, I think I confused myself, but I hope I didn't confuse you. Anyways, so let's read that again. So Rav Adabrei Rav Yitzchak Amar Halishka Aktsuye Mekatzia, right? This Lishka really was along the western wall from the south, from close to the southwestern point to close to the northwestern point. And if you're coming from the north, it looked like it was in the south. And if you're coming from the south, it looked like it was in the north. But again, the fact of the matter is, it was along the western wall, mostly in the southwestern part. Fine. And it makes sense to say that it was mainly in the southwestern part of the Beis HaMoked, according to all opinions. Mimai, how come? Midu'aminan lechem aponim alechem aponim. Umishaninan amar Rav Huna bar Rav Yeshua marka chashuv derech yomin marka chashuv derech smol. Because both Mishnayos in Masechta Tamid and Masechta Midas also mention the lechem haponim, right? The place where they prepared the lechem haponim. So the Mishnah in Masechta Midos is more explicit about it, and it says Dromis Mizrachis that in the southeastern corner of the Beis HaMoked, hi lishka shayu osim balechem aponim. That's where the lechem aponim was made, in the southeastern corner. Now the Mishnah so that was Mishnah in Midos. The Mishnah in Tamid, however, was not explicit. It just listed 4 offices in the Beis HaMoked. The first of which was the Lishkas Beis HaTloim, which it said was in the northwestern corner. It then listed all the other offices, with the final one being where they prepared the lechem aponim. So again, in the Mishnah in Midos, it says that the office of the lechem aponim was in the southeastern corner, whereas in the Mishnah so that was in Midos, in the Mishnah in Tamid, it doesn't say exactly where the office of the lechem aponim was. However, it lists all 4 offices, mistama in some kind of order, right? Mistama in some kind of chronological order, in terms of clockwise or counterclockwise. The first one being the Lishkas Beis HaTloim, which it says is in the northwestern corner of the Beis HaMoked, concluding with the office where they prepared the lechem aponim, where it doesn't say exactly which corner it was in, but we want to conclude that it makes sense to say that both in the Mishnah in Midos and in the Mishnah in Tamid, they agree that the reality is that the Lishkas Beis HaTloim was in the southwestern corner of the Beis HaMoked, and the only reason why it says in Masechta Tamid that it was in the northwestern corner was just your perspective, that if you're coming from the south, it looked like it was in the northwestern corner. And says of Rav Yeshua that it makes sense, because how do you resolve the 2 Mishnayos in terms of vis-a-vis the office where they prepared the lechem aponim? If we want to say that they're both saying the same thing, well, then we could say it like this. Well, in Masechta Midos, it's clear, right? It says it explicitly that the office where they prepared the lechem aponim was in the southeastern corner of the Beis HaMoked. Says Rav Yeshua, we could say that the Mishnah in Masechta Tamid agrees with that, if we say that the reality is that in Masechta Tamid, even though it says that the Lishkas Beis HaTloim was in the northwestern corner, the reality is that it was in the southwestern corner. It just looked like it was in the northwestern corner. And then, if that's the case, then you could say that in Masechta Tamid, when it lists the 4 offices, it's listing them clockwise, with the final office being the office of the lechem aponim, which was in the southeastern corner. So, if we say that in Masechta Tamid, when it says that the Lishkas Beis HaTloim was in the northwestern corner, really it was in the southwestern corner. So then it lists first the Lishkas HaTloim, which was in the south, which reality was in the southwestern corner. And then afterwards it lists the Lishkas HaChosamos, which then, if we're going clockwise, would be in the northwestern corner. V'achas Lishkas Beis HaMoked, and then the Lishkas Beis HaMoked, which was in the northeast corner, and then finally V'achas Lishkas She'osim Ba Lechem Aponim, which would be in the southeast corner. And therefore, so says the Gemara, Lechem aponim, from the fact that we say, wait, but it mentions the lechem aponim both in Talmud and in Midos, and we answer, yeah. One round the Amr is saying counterclockwise, i.e., right, meaning if you imagine you're standing in front of the Beis HaMoked, so if you turn right, so then, and go around the building, so you'll be going counterclockwise. So Masechta Midos, we're going counterclockwise. So first it mentions the Lishkas Atloim in the southwestern corner, and then counterclockwise you get to the southeastern corner, which is where the Lechem Aponim office was. And in Masechta Tamid, we are going clockwise. And therefore it says first the Lishkas Hatloim which in reality we're saying was in the southwestern corner, even according to the Mishnah in Masechta Tamid. It's just a matter of perspective. And then you get to the Beis HaChosamos in the northwestern, then you get to the Lishkas Beis HaMoked in the northeastern, and finally to the Lishkas Lechem Aponim in the southeastern, and both of them actually agree. So therefore it makes sense to say that even according to Masechta Tamid, the Lishkas Hatzolim was in the southwestern corner. It just looked like it was in the northwestern corner if you're coming from the south. That's how you can reconcile the Lechem Aponim question and say that both in Tamid and in Midos, the Lishkas Lechem Aponim was in the southeastern corner. But if you say that no, the Lishkas Hatzolim was mamish in the northwestern corner, my teirutz the Lechem Aponim. Well, then how do you reconcile the Lechem Aponim? How are you gonna, in Masechta Midos, we're saying it was in the southeastern corner, but if you say that in Masechta Tamid, the Lishkas Hatzolim was mamish in the northwestern corner, well then, how are you gonna calculate that the Lishkas Lechem Aponim was in the southeastern corner? If you go clockwise, then it would be in the southwestern corner. If you go counterclockwise, it would be in the northeastern corner. It wouldn't be in the southeastern corner. So rather it must be that the Lishkas Hatzolim was in fact in the southwestern corner of the Beis HaMoked. It just looked like it was in the northwestern corner. But one second, we said that whenever you go, you should always go right. And therefore, how can we be saying that the Mishnah in Midos is mentioning the offices counterclockwise, which would be going left? No. Clockwise. So how can we say that the Mishnah in Tamid is going clockwise, which would be going to your left? But I thought we always go to your right. So, when we say always go to your right, that's in the context of the Avodah and the Beis HaMikdash. But here we're just giving a cheshbon. Here we're just calculating and we're listing things how they were. We don't necessarily have to be going right per se. Okay. Yeah, that was pretty technical, right? Let's go on. So we had said in the Mishnah on Daf Yudalid that in general, well, let's say this. During the 7 days of quarantine, the Kohen Gadol did all of the avodah himself. However, in general, he doesn't have to. In general, the Kohen Gadol could do whatever he wants. If he wants to be makriv, he can be makriv. If he wants to eat, he can eat. And now the Gemara is going to explain what that means. What does it mean that the Kohen Gadol can offer sort of first? So, Omer olazo ani makriv, minchazo ani makriv. Pretty simple. He says, well, they're offering a korban ola, and he says, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to offer the ola. Or they're offering a korban mincha. He says, you know what, I'm going to offer the korban mincha. So he does. What does it mean that he gets the first, that he can take the first part? He goes over to a korban chatas that the kohanim are about to eat. He says, you know what, I'm going to eat this korban chatas. Or they're about to eat a korban asham. He says, you know what, I'm going to eat this korban asham. He could make the rules like that. He could decide what he's going to eat, decide what he's going to offer. On Shavuos, when they offer the shtei alechem, the 2 loaves of wheat bread from the new harvest, so he could take one of them. And every week when they offered the lechem aponim, well, not offered, but every week, right, there would be new lechem aponim. There were 12 of these loaves of bread every single week. And every Shabbos, they would they would divide up these breads and eat them. So we're saying that he could take 4 or 5 of those breads. We're gonna see a machlokas about how exactly you calculate 4 or 5. Rabbi Omer Olam Chamish. Rabbi says no, he always takes 5. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, that the pasuk says that it will be for Aharon and his children. Half of it goes to Aharon and half of it goes to his children. Now you might be wondering, wait, so isn't half of 12 6? Why is Rabbi saying that half would be 5? We'll get there in a minute. Hagufa kasher. We said 1 second. I don't understand. On the one hand, Amart notochala achas mishtechalos mani Rebbe. On the one hand, we say that he could take one of the 2 breads of the lechem upon him, one of the 2 breads of the shtei alechem on Shavuos, which sounds like Rebbe, who says in the Seifa that half of it goes to Har and half of it goes to his children. So this sounds like Rebbe. Damar Pal B'Shakil, who says they can take half. But then when we move on to the next section, it says Arba o Chamish mimayse lechem aponim. Asa under Rabbanan, Damar Lo Shakil Palga. But then it says that from the lechem aponim, you can take either 4 or 5. And again, we're going to have to explain what this means, 4 or 5. It takes either 4 or 5. But that sounds like it's not like Rebbe, because Rebbe would say it takes half, but this is less than half. 4, right? I mean, even if you say that we're only dividing up a total of 10 out of the 12 breads, so then half of that is 5. If you're saying 4 or 5, well then that must be according to the rabbis who say that Itaka takes less than, that the Kohen Gadol doesn't exactly take half, he takes less than half. But then if we look at the Seifa, if we continue, it says Rebbe Omer Olam Chamish. Then Rebbe argues and he says no, he always takes 5. So meaning on the one hand, the Reisha, which says that he takes one of the two Shtei Lechem on Shavuos, sounds like Rebbe who says that he takes half. But then we say that from the Lechem Aponim takes 4 or 5, which sounds like the rabbis who say Taka takes a little bit less than half. And then we're saying that according to Rebbe, he always takes 5 of the Lechem Aponim. So Reisha v'Sefer Rebbe Mitziyasa Rabbanon, we're saying that the first part is Rebbe and the last part is Rebbe, but in the middle we have the rabbis. So Amar Abaye says Abaye Reisha u'Mitziyasa Rabbanon. So it says Abaye actually the Reisha, where we say that he takes one of the two Shtei Alechem on Shavuos, is actually the rabbis. And then of course the middle part is also the rabbis, where we say that he takes 4 or 5 of the Lechem upon him, that he's taking less than half. But one second, by the Shtei Alechem, if he's taking one of the two Shtei Alechem, well, doesn't that sound like Rebbe who says that he takes half? One of two is half. The reason why the rabbis would say that when it comes to the Shtei Alechem, the Kohen Gadol would take one of the two, which is half and not less than half, that's because it's not michubad, it's not honorable to give the Kohen Gadol a piece of bread. You give him a whole bread. And therefore, since there are only 2 breads, so if we're going to give him anything, it's going to be a whole bread, and therefore he ends up taking half, but that's not because he's entitled to half, it's just because we don't want to give him less than a whole piece of bread, which memela means he's going to have a half. But really, the first part, which says that he takes one of the 2 Shtei Alechem, and the second part of the Brisa, which says that he takes 4 or 5, which we're about to explain, of the Lechem Aponim, both of those are the Rabbi's opinion. And then Rebbe says at the end that when it comes to Lechem Aponim, he always takes 5, which is half. Umay Arba Chamish. So now, says Abaye, he explains, what does it mean that the rabbis say that the Kohen Gadol takes either 4 or 5 of the Lechem Aponim? So remember, so the Lechem Aponim, what were the Lechem Aponim? So every week, they would, right, Beis Garmu, they would prepare these special loaves of bread, these 12 loaves of bread that they would store, that they would then take into the, as we learned in Masechta Shkalim, there were different tables there in the Ulam, that they would take the breads in on Shabbos and put them in the Shulchan and take out the breads from that were there the week before, and they would stay fresh the entire week, and then they would replace the breads every Shabbos, and then they would divide up the breads from that were meaning every Shabbos they would replace the breads from the week before with new breads, and then they would divide up the breads from the week before, half to the mishmar that was coming in, because the mishmars that we've learned about would transition on Shabbos. So half of the 12 breads would go to the mishmar that was leaving, and half of them would go to the mishmar that was coming. Okay, fine. Now, my Arba Chamish. So what does it mean that if the Kohen Gadol wants, he could take 4 or 5 of these breads? So the Rabbanon, the Amir Nichnas no tel sheish v'yotze no tel sheish. So according to the rabbis who say that of the Lechem Aponim, the 12 loaves, 6 of them go to the mishmar that is coming, and 6 of them go to the mishmar that is leaving. Low, and nobody is taking any extra breads for the fact that they're closing up the gates on Motzei Shabbos. Don't worry about that. We'll get that in a minute from now with Rabbi Yehuda. So Mishtem Esrei by Mipalig. So therefore, according to the rabbis, 6 of these breads go to the mishmar that's leaving, 6 of the breads go to the mishmar that's coming. So that's a total of 12. The Kohen Gadol could take half of it. So that is 6. So now Batzer Chad Mipalga, Chomesh Shakil. However, the opinion of the rabbis, we had said a minute ago, unlike Rebbe who says that the Kohen Gadol takes 50%, the opinion of the rabbis is that he takes a little bit less than 50%. And therefore, right, the opinion of the rabbis is that he takes less than 50%. And therefore, if we're saying that all 12 breads are divided up among the Kohanim, half of them to the mishmar that's leaving, half of them to the mishmar that is coming, and we're saying that the Kohen Gadol could take a little bit less than half, well, half of 12 is 6, a little bit less than that is 5, so that would be how he's taking 5. And the Rabbi Yehuda, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, so according to Rabbi Yehuda, however, the mishmar that is coming in, the new mishmar, they're going to have to lock up all the gates of the Beis Hamikdash on Motzei Shabbos, and therefore, as payment, as reimbursement for their efforts, they get 2 extra breads, and therefore, of the 12 breads, 7 go to the mishmar that comes, and 5 of them go to the mishmar that's leaving, and those extra 2 breads that go to the mishmar that comes are untouchable. That is theirs. The Kohen Gadol doesn't take anything from those. Those are out of the cheshbon, and therefore, what's left? 10 breads. Of those 10 breads, the Kohen Gadol could take half of them. However, according to the rabbis, the Kohen Gadol doesn't take half. He takes a little bit less than half, so he takes 4. Okay, so V'yotze noto chamish. So me'eser b'ay mipalig. So we're talking about dividing up a total of 10 breads, because 2 of them are out of the picture. But tzirchada mipalga. So you take 1. The Kohen Gadol would take 1 less than half. V'shakil arba, and he takes 4. Right? Because if we have 10 breads to cheshbon, and we're saying half, and that is 5, and the Kohen Gadol takes a little bit less than that, so he takes 4. That is how we get to, according to the opinion of the rabbis, who argue on Rebbe, and say that the Kohen Gadol takes a little bit less than half, that's how he could take 4 or 5 of the Lechem Apanim, if we're talking about, according to the opinion of the rabbis, that they divide, that we start with a total of 12, so then half of that is 6, a little bit less than that is 5. According to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that we start out with 10 because 2 of them are payment for the Mishmar Haba, Hanichnas. So then we start with 10, you divide in 2 is 5, a little bit less than that is 4. That's how we get to 4 or 5. Rava Amar, says Rava, Kula Rebbe. Rava wants to say that actually this Brisa is entirely Rebbe. And therefore, when it says half of the Shtei Alechem on Shavuos, makes sense. One of the 2 breads, that's 50%. That's Rebbe's opinion. Certainly in the Seifa, where it says that Rebbe says that the Kohen Gadol always takes 5, okay, we're going to say that's Rebbe's opinion. Well, obviously it's Rebbe's opinion. It says that Rebbe Omer. And then the middle, we're going to say, where it says 4 or 5, we're going to say that that's also the opinion of Rebbe. Okay, how? Rav Amar Kula Rebbe, Rav wants to say it's all Rebbe. V'savrlak Rebbe Yehuda. And Rebbe holds like Rebbe Yehuda. Okay, and Rabbi Yehuda says that 2 of the breads are out of the picture because they go to pay for the nichnas, the mishmar nichnas, for closing all the gates on Motzei Shabbos. So we start with 10, okay, and the Kohen Gadol could take half according to Rebbe. But then how do you get to 4? Shouldn't it always be 5? If you're Rebbe and you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, that we're starting with a total of 10 breads, and you divide that in 2, that's 5. How could the Kohen Gadol ever take 4? Lokash, it's no problem. It depends if there is a mishmar that is sticking around or not. V'shakil arba ilek mishmar masakev me'eser by the miflag v'shakil chamesh yachi my Rebbe omer la'olam chamesh kasha. What is this mishmar masakev? What is this mishmar that sticks around? So interestingly, so on the shalosh regalim, so all the mishmaros work in the Beis Hamikdash. It's very busy. All the mishmaros work in the Beis Hamikdash. So right, we had said that there's 24 mishmaros, and each mishmar works 2 weeks a year. However, on the festivals, all the mishmaros come and do their work. So now on the Shabbos that falls out during the festival, So all of the mishmars divide up the lechem apanim amongst themselves. So as unlike a regular week where it was just two mishmaros, the one that's coming and the one that's going, and they would divide up the lechem apanim. On the Shalosh Regalim, all of the mishmaros who were there would divide up the lechem apanim. Okay. And what if Yom Tiv, let's say the first day of Pesach is on a Sunday, so the mishmaros already had to get there the day before, before Shabbos. So even though that Shabbos is technically not Yom Tiv, it's the day before Yom Tiv, but since all the mishmaros had to be there already, so they can also divide up equally in that case. And also if the last day of Yom Tiv, the last day of Pesach, let's say, was a Friday, so then the Shabbos that follows, even though it's no longer Pesach, but they would also, all the mishmaros who were there already, this could be Sukkot also, or Shavuos, whatever it is, all the mishmaros who were there already would also divide up equally on Shabbos because, it's not like they could have gotten back home, it's not like they had a chance to get home after Yom Tiv. Anyways. The shaila is what happens when the last day of Yom Tiv is a Thursday, or the first day of Yom Tiv is a Monday. Right? Let's say the first day of Yom Tiv is a Monday, and you have mishmaros who got there already before Shabbos. Or if the last day of Yom Tov was on a Thursday, and you had mishmaros who they didn't leave immediately on Friday, they stayed in Jerusalem for the following Shabbos as well. So are they able to divide up in the lechem apanim and take a part of the lechem apanim as well? So the answer is we give them 2 breads and say, here, however many people you are, divide it up amongst yourself. Whether you're 1 million people, whether you're 5 people, it doesn't matter. Here's 2 of the breads, divide it up yourselves. So in that case, so if you're Rabbi Yehuda, and 2 of the breads to begin with are going to the Mishmar HaNichnas because they're going to be locking up the gates on Motzei Shabbos. So now you're left with 10. And then if it's also this case where you have the Kohanim who either got there early for Yom Tiv or stayed around later after Yom Tiv, we give them 2 breads and say divide it up amongst yourselves. You're only left with 8. And Rebbe says that the Kohen Gadol takes half, so you could take 4. But in a Shabbos where there's no, mishmars that stuck around, so then it's a total of 10, and he takes 5. So again, Lo kasha the ika mishmar misakev. It depends if there's a mishmar that stuck around after Yom Tiv or got there early before Yom Tiv. Hadelek mishmar misakev. Or it depends if it's a week where, regular week where there's no mishmar misakev. Ika mishmar misakev mishmona by the miflag v'shakil arba. So if there is this mishmar that kind of got there early or stuck around late, well then they get 2 breads. So yeah, you start with 12, you subtract 2 that goes to the mishmar nichnas, you subtract another 2 that goes to the mishmar misakev, you're left with 8. The Kohen Gadol takes 4. Yileka mishmar misakev. If there isn't this mishmar misakev, so then me'eser by the miflag. So then you get rid of 2 and you give it to the mishmar nichnas as payment for closing up the gates, and you're left with 10. So me'eser by the miflag, you divide up 10 in 2 v'shakal chamesh, and the Kohen Gadol could take 5. Iachi my Rebbe Omer le'olam chamesh kasha. But if that's the case, we ask against Rava, because Rava says that the entire brayso is really Rebbe. Right? But then what does it mean though that Rebbe seems to be arguing in the end and saying Rebbe says no, it's always 5. We just said that, if we want to argue that the middle is Rebbe, then sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 5. It's not so smooth to say that, when Rebbe jumps in at the end, he's really jumping in on his own opinion that he said a second ago, which is different than what he's saying now. It's not so simple. So the Gemara leaves off with the kasha on Rava. Anyways, that was Daf Yud Zayin Masechta Yoma. Yeah, it was very, very technical, right? We started off discussing the Lishkas Atloim, tried to make a unity solution between, by Rav Adabar, Breder of Yitzchak, to say that actually both in Yoma, in Tamid and in Midos, really the Lishkas Atloim is in the southwestern corner of the Beis Hamoked. And when it says that it's in the northwestern corner of the Beis Hamoked, it's really just from your perspective. If you're coming from the south, it looks like it's in the northwestern corner, but really it is in the southwestern corner. And then we discussed how the Kohen Gadol can take whatever, he can eat whatever portions of the korbanos he wants. He could offer whatever korbanos he wants. Then we also got into the division up of the lechem aponim and the shtei alechem. We said that by the shtei alechem, the Kohen Gadol could take 1 of the 2 of breads on Shavuos. And then when it comes to lechem aponim, which was every week, so we saw 2 opinions. One is that he could take 4 or 5. The other is that Rebbe says that he could take 5, which is really half. And the question is, how do we resolve these things? Who's saying what? Because the ratio sounds like Rebbe, who says half, and the Seifa is definitely Rebbe. What about the middle? Sounds like it's the rabbis. What's going on? So Abai says, look, actually the ratio and the middle are both the rabbis. And even though the rabbis say that generally the Kohen Gadol would take slightly less than half, that's not possible by the Shtei Lechem, because slightly less than half would be less than one whole bread. We don't want to give the Kohen Gadol less than a whole bread, so we give him one whole bread, which technically is half, but that's okay according to the rabbis. And the middle part is that it's 4 or 5, depending on if we go like the opinion of the rabbis versus Rabbi Yehuda regarding how many breads are actually available to be divided up. The opinion of Rabbi Yehuda is that you actually only have 10 available breads to divide up, because 2 automatically go to the Mishmar Nichnas as payment, right, to the incoming Mishmar as payment for locking the gates of the Beis Hamikdash at night, and therefore you really only have 10 to begin with. And according to the rabbis, the Kohen Gadol only takes less than half, so therefore 10 divided by 2 is 5, a little bit less than that is 4, that's how you get to 4. Whereas the opinion of the rabbis and the machlokas between the Rabban and Rabbi Yehuda with regards to how many breads you start out with is that you don't have to give 2 breads to the Mishmar Nichnas as any payment for closing the gates. So therefore you start out with 12, you divide that in half, it's 6, a little bit less than that is 5, and that's how you can get 4 or 5. According to Rava, all the opinions there is actually Rebbe, so of course one of the two of the Shtei Lechem is 50%, like Rebbe's opinion. When it says 4 or 5, well then let's jump to the Seifa where it says that Rebbe says that it's always 5, so that's obviously also Rebbe's opinion. And then we can explain the middle part as well, where when it says 4 or 5, that actually depends on if there is like extra mishmaros around the time of Yom Tov. If there are these extra mishmaros, well then they also get 2. So, and he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, in addition to the fact that 2 breads are going to the Mishmar Nichnas as payment for locking the gates, so now you only start with 10. 2 of them are then going to this other Mishmar that came early for Yom Tov or stick around after Yom Tov, so therefore you really only have 8 left, and the Kohen Gadol could take half, which is 4. But if there aren't these Mishmars who got there earlier or stuck around, so then you could start with 10, and you could take 5. That's how you get 4 or 5. Then we ended with the Kasha and Rava, because how could you say that it's all Rebbe if Rebbe seems to be arguing specifically at the end? Alright, Cheved, that was Daf Yud Zayin. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.